Good evening, everybody. Are we live streaming now, Emma? We are indeed, so we are live. Good evening, members, officers, and members of the public. This committee meeting is being recorded. It's also going out live, and the link to the live stream can be found on the Council's website at www.tendringdc.gov.uk/live meetings. For the purpose of the recording, I will introduce everyone. I'm Councillor Maria Fowler, the Chairman of the Planning Committee, and I will introduce the members of the committee separately. Councillor Alexander.
Good evening, Chairman.
Councillor Everett.
Good evening, Chairman.
Councillor Placey.
Good evening, Chair.
Councillor Sudra.
Chair.
Councillor White.
Good evening, Chairman.
Councillor Wiggins.
Good evening, Chairman.
Thank you. The council officers assisting us this evening are from Committee Services, Bethany Jones and Emma Howard from Leadership Support. From Planning Services, John Pateman G, Michael Pingram, Charlotte Cooper, Naomi Hart, and Gary Guyver, Director of Planning, and Mrs Fisher from the Planning Department. Changes to the... I got that wrong, that's the Legal Department. Changes to the agenda running order, there are none. Each application will be presented by the officer, followed by public speaking. The applicant or the agent, any members of the public who have already asked to speak for or against the application, then will be followed by a speaker from the town or parish council, and finally the ward member. Members of the committee will then have a chance to question the officer. Once all the questions have been answered, the committee will then debate the application. When all points are discussed, finally I shall ask if we have a resolution and then call for a proposer and a seconder, and we shall vote in accordance with the normal rules. Item 1 on the agenda. Apologies for absences and substitutions. And I have a statement here that I'm now going to read to everybody. I have been made aware that during the course of yesterday, Councillors Jeff Bray and Peter Harris, our colleagues on this committee, informed the Chief Executive by formal notice to that effect that they were resigning from the Conservative political group on Tendring District Council, and that they were forming a new political group, namely the Tendring Residents Alliance Group. One of the consequences of those actions is that Councillor Bray and Harris have ceased to be members of this committee, and this is why they are absent this evening. The leader of the Conservative group, Councillor Carlo Guglielmi, will notify the Chief Executive as soon as he is able to of the names of their replacements, and I look forward to welcoming those councillors to the Planning Committee in due course. Thank you. Item 2. The minutes of the last meeting, which was held on Tuesday the 24th of October. Have you all had a chance to have a look at the minutes? Councillor Alexander, was that a proposal to accept? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Placey, are we all in favour? Thank you very much. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any? I'll take that as a no. Item 4, questions on notice pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 38. Bethany, are there any?
Thank you, Chair. No, there are none.
There are none. Thank you. Okay, so now we shall move on to the planning applications. And the first one on the list tonight, which is item 5 on the agenda, A1 22/02072/FULHH, which is 3 De Vere Estate, Great Bentley, and to present that one, Charlotte Cooper. Thank you, Charlotte.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks full planning permission for a drop curb with driveway access and parking to the front of the property. So this is the application site here. It serves a semi-detached 2-storey dwelling. It's located on this northwest corner between Forrington Road and De Vere Estate. The site is located within the settlement development boundary of Great Bentley, and the application is before members tonight as Tendring District Council own the parcel of land where the drop curb and driveway access will be installed. Here's an aerial image of the site and some site photographs showing the front of the site where the parking to the front of the property will be and the drop curb and driveway access. These photos show the relationship between the application site and the adjacent side of the road, which has more hard standing over on this side, which is thought to make the application appear more in keeping with the area. And this shows the views from Forrington Road. And this is the proposed site layout plan. The proposer is deemed to be of an acceptable design and appearance, in keeping with the area. It has no significant harmful effects on the residential amenities, and we haven't received any objections from Highways, and therefore officers are recommending the application for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Charlotte. Public speaking on behalf of the applicant, Kelly McLean. Oh, Stephen McLean. Okay. If you'd like to come forward here, and when you're ready, push the little button in front of you, and you have 3 minutes, Mr. McLean.
My client has lived at this address for around 40 years. The front garden is a reasonably sized garden, but is unusable. The original estate was designed and did not take into account for parking of cars for all residents. So obviously my client hasn't got any parking off street. Due to obviously the comments received and the recommendation from the officer. Parking in the address has been problematic for many years. My client only has currently 2 cars, but with children growing up it will increase to 4 cars in only a few years' time. The drop curb will not create any loss for any other street parking or visitors and other residents. There are other instances within the estate of other houses in the same situation. There's one further down at 15 De Vere Estate, which is in a similar scenario. On the Thornton Road and Stoic Lane, there's another scenario in Stoic Lane with Larkfield Road. My client has asked, obviously, if you could give a careful consideration to this, that'd be much appreciated. That's all, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. I'll just ask the officer if there's anything you'd like to come back on.
Thank you, Chair. No, thank you.
Okay, so there are no other speakers. So I will now go over to the members of the committee. Councillor Everett and then Councillor Sudra.
Thank you, Chair. On that diagram, the red lines, I take it, are the sight lines for visibility coming out of the property. One of the conditions put down by Essex County Council is that visibility splay is kept clear at all times. However, to the left of that, there is an area where parking of potentially motor vehicles, quite tall motor vehicles, could be placed. What is the view in terms of the visibility splay and the safety, please?
Thank you. Yes, so the lay-by here I have checked with Highways and they've raised no official objection to it. They have argued that the verge coming out of the property here is wide enough for a clear view behind any vehicles that are parked in the lay-by. And they've also said that if this application is approved, the next stage, the applicants will then apply for a vehicle crossing application, and then the lay-by is further assessed at that point. And if it needs to be shortened for any reason, it will be assessed at that point. Thank you.
Councillor Sudra?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my main issue is the telegraph pole. And similarly, with the cars being parked there, I'm not sure if it is a very clear sort of vision with a car coming out. So, yeah, if you could just tell us more about that.
Thank you. So again, Highways haven't raised any official objection to the telegraph pole, and they have said it will be further assessed at the vehicle crossing application stage. There is the possibility that the applicant may be required to move the pole, which will be at the applicant's own expense, and that will be dealt with at the vehicle crossing application. But at the moment they haven't raised any official objection to it, and they are saying that the verge is wide enough to get views behind.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor White?
Thank you, Chairman. It's about the same point, actually. I think this could well be another example where Essex County Council have done a desktop exercise and they haven't seen what we saw on site. I think the application as such welcomes praise, but, and it is a but, we did consider, did we not, this morning, whether or not there could be a condition put on this application that no cars other than those travelling into the main road could stay parked there, because we could not see past the two cars that were permanently parked in the lay-by. As far as the mains pole is concerned, as you say, that will be considered at a later state. But please, could I ask, what is the later state? I thought once we granted this permission, I wasn't expecting it to come back yet again for something else to be added to it. So.
Now I come in, Chair. Okay, so a couple of things there. As far as I know, my officer will correct me, this is the application in planning terms to be considered, but also the Highways Authority have their own application to consider later, because of course they are the Highways Authority and they have to expressly consent to any new access joining their road. So that is a separate and not a material consideration for us. That's a separate matter. But of course, the Highways Authority, in their consideration, will need to be assured of the safety of this. So even if we do pass it here, they have to be assured themselves that it is a safe access as well. But of course, safe access is one of our material considerations before us. In respect of the conditions in your papers, there's a number of conditions there controlling what we can control, and one of the things that is there is the removal of hedgerow in order to allow the visibility as the car is coming out, so you allow the visibility across. And of course, as you're coming out of that driveway, you will have a rolling vision. It will be moving. Your vision of, as you're looking left and right, will be around that whole area as you're coming across. So you'll be looking across the path, across the lay-by, which will vary because it may have cars in it, it may not. Those cars may have darkened windows, which you can't see through. Those cars may have see-through windows. Unfortunately, that is a risk here. I don't think there's any reason to say it's not. I think there is a risk that you are, on occasion, going to be able to be blocked, your view, by that cars in that lay-by, which is exactly the same as potentially the main junction itself. As you're coming out of that junction looking left and right currently, if you have a number of vans with, I don't know, they're all like sealed windows, you can't see anywhere past those, they will slightly obscure your vision. Unfortunately, this is a waiting game of likelihood. I can't say for certain that this is 100% safe all of the time, but given the nature of the driveway, it's only one car at a time. It's You're going to know the road. You're going to be able to judge it as you're coming out on a rolling out. I think it's a very minimal safety risk, but I do appreciate members are considering that. But in our proportion of probability here, given the highways have supported it, it is a lay-by which already has its own access issues, and ultimately is regarded as part of the highway. On balance, the recommendation from officers is to approve.
Thank the officer for that, but County Highways effectively have said already we can't see anything wrong with it. So if we don't make our comments known now, it'll just be rubber stamping it when it goes to their own application. I think now's the time to let our fears be known, but I thank you for the answer.
Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, Chair. Moving along in the same direction as everyone else at the moment. When we visited today, we saw a pavement structure and then grass. Presumably that will have to be removed to allow this to go ahead. Now, the one thing that both Councillor White and myself noted was the fact is that people coming out of the road was having awful difficulty in seeing. We were standing there and parked cars and they were looking. So I think you've covered this actually in 4, in action required, which says such visibility displays shall be retained free of any obstruction in perpetuity. These visibility displays must not form part of the vehicle surface of the access. Does that mean, in blunt language, my language, you can't park there? That's what we were trying to get to.
The problem with a car is it's not an object that's a permanent object. So I would actually suggest that that condition could be found fault with in respect of the lay-by, in the context that it's not a feature that is a permanent feature that you can control and say it would be in breach of that. It'll be a changeable obstruction that can change minute to minute. So I don't think it would be possible to enforce that in respect of parking. But in respect of anything else, like telegraph poles and other matters, we would.
Just so that I've got this clear in my mind, when you leave the property, well, it's encased in a very nice hedge, and there is a small entrance, which obviously, as you rightfully said, is the problem, and this is why they need to remove a part of the hedging and expand that. But then you're right onto a pavement, and then a grass verge. Now, not long enough for a vehicle, but just long enough with the pavement to park a vehicle on. Well, I always was under the understanding you can't park across a pavement. So I was asking, I looked at 4 in the conditions, and I thought that's very contradictory, because how are you going to enforce that? Are we in our right to make some form of condition which will literally say no parking on that new build and drop curb? Could we do that?
So are you referring to so on the screen at the moment, there's a car, essentially the centre of that visibility display on the television screen at the moment. Are you meaning that parking position to prevent? So at the moment, it's demonstrating a car can drive out, You're concerned there's a risk that a car can park effectively where the pavement is and block pedestrians coming across that pavement. Well, if it did that, it would be causing an obstruction to the highway. So on that basis, they wouldn't be allowed to do that by default because that's not their land, that's highway land.
I'm so sorry, Chair. Do you mind if I just... I'd like to get this... So, if that's not their land, who does the green sward, the grass sward that's beyond that pavement, who does that belong to?
I would have to check, but I thought the green sward was ours, but I will double check in a moment. My apologies. Sorry. So the pavement and the green sward is our land, but in highway terms, you've got the public right of way in any event. So, sorry, I got confused between the two. Both apply because you have public right of way over that land. Essentially, it's our private highway, but it's a public right of way anyway, and you have us that own the land in any event. So the control is ours, and essentially, you would not allow a car to simply park there. It would obstruct the public right of way.
Last one, Chair, and I'll make some kind of a proposal, if I may. Chair, may I have one last go?
Yes, of course you may. Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, just to make sure it's clear in my mind, looking at I have exactly the same thing here. You can see plainly on that if the car was to park there, they'd be on the greensward and on the pavement. Or are we in a position? I know I like these words very much, especially the perpetuity, very much. But is any condition that we can put on which says you cannot park on that greensward or that pavement? Because this doesn't cover that.
While I would say it's unlikely, you can put a condition on that. I think we could, for the avoidance of doubt, put a condition to that effect.
Councillor Everett.
And before we get to seconding that, I have a question about the area of parking in front of the property. Is that a permeable surface?
Just give us a moment, we'll just check the application itself to see what the materials are. If I can just come back to you on the condition, just to clarify, a condition that you may wish to consider would be to ensure no parking at any time on the access and driveway leading to the parking area. Just to clarify, that's the section we're talking about. The material in respect of the parking area, and I assume it continues through to the driveway, is regarded as block paved. Now, sadly, there's two types of that. Some is permeable and some isn't. But we can condition to that effect that that's to be agreed if you wish to add that condition as well.
Thank you. That would solve that problem straight away. Thanks.
Are there any further questions for the officer, Councillor Everett?
And I'd like to second Councillor Alexander's proposal with that added caveat and just added. Thank you.
And you confirm that that's what you're going ahead with, Councillor Alexander? Yes? Yep. Okay. You're both in agreement with the added conditions? Okay. In that case then, I think we'll go to the vote on this one. So that was for approval with the added conditions. Councillor Alexander.
For.
Councillor Everett.
For.
Councillor Placey.
For.
Councillor Sudra.
For.
Councillor White.
For.
Councillor Wiggins.
For.
And I am also voting for. That application is approved. Item 6 on the agenda, A2 23/01448 HH 42 Elm Grove, Clacton. And presenting this one this evening is our Head of Planning, Mr. Pateman G.
Yes, unfortunately my officer wasn't able to make it tonight for this one, so I'm taking over. Bear with me as we go along. So this is number 42 Elm Grove, Clacton-on-Sea. It's a retrospective application for a single-storey rear extension, which you saw today. So in theory, you should remember that you visited the road just there. That's the site. Close up of the site. It's a semi-detached property. And again, aerial photographs so you can see it from above. And the proposal is already in situ. We are an extension to the rear. It is 3.8 metres in depth, 3.1 metres high. And that's it. Obviously, your officers have considered the extension by reason of its design, size, relationship with the surroundings. In our eyes, does not represent harm sufficient to warrant refusal. And you have some views of the side as well. And that's about it. And I'll just go back to the plans. Ultimately, our recommendation is one of approval, given its size and scale. But I will make one correction to the recommendation before us. It's a retrospective application, and I note we've put a time condition number 1 to be implemented. Obviously that's not necessary to be there now, so I would recommend that's removed, and therefore we are just left with the approved plans and our recommendation to approve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pateman G. There are no speakers for this item, so I will go straight over to the committee for questions for the officer. Councillor Placey.
A short one, really. This has come before us because Tendring District Council own the property. Otherwise, it would be done and dusted by yourselves, yeah?
That's correct. So I forgot to say at the very beginning, yes, the application is owned by the site. House is owned by Tendring District Council. Under your consultation arrangements, it has to come to committee on that basis.
Councillor Everett and then Councillor White.
So am I correct in thinking that this would be, under normal circumstances, had it not been our property, would have been dealt with under forgotten. Thank you. Not delegated powers. No. You know what I'm talking about. Help me out.
Had this not needed to come to committee, it's very likely officers would have delegated to approve and issue the decision. Yeah.
Councillor White.
Very much. Very much in favour of this application, but how does it building get built to this stage if it's one of ours? Why, presumably it had building regs. Whoever did the building regs, why didn't they give us the wink and say, yeah, is this permitted development, or why is it got to this state?
Well, as head of both, ultimately they are two different regimes and have to deal with their applications on two different systems and not share information to a degree anyway. We also have approved inspectors that don't have to tell us what they're doing, and of course they deal with an awful lot of sites as well. And arguably, because it's our land, there was a third point of a department involved as well, but I could only deal with what's presented to me as a planning application with my planning hat on, and therefore that is the proposal before us.
Thank you, Mr. Pateman G. Are there any further questions from the committee? Councillor Everett.
I remembered what I was trying to ask.
I'm glad that you did.
Was it the case that it would have been passed under permitted development had it not been?
No, given the height of a flat roof against the boundary, within 2 metres of that boundary, it's higher than 2.5. So and there might be another reason, but that's the obvious one I can see. It's not permitted development, so it would always require planning permission. Of course, in some instances like this, people aren't clear about what is permitted development and have made a natural mistake, but that's why retrospective applications are a foreseeable way forward on that basis.
Councillor Alexander.
I must say, listening to the debate and the answers to the questions, this always concerns me how we work as a unified authority, and yet we don't seem to communicate with joined up writing for some reason. We have this thing where one department runs its own little organisation and others run theirs. Saying that, we're in the situation in which we are in now. And then I'm also concerned about a president. This has happened now once. Yeah, I always fear that we could be pointing the way to a floodgate to anyone who wishes to do this, considering that, as rightfully said, the actual property belongs to TDC itself. And you could end up with a small estate as it is, completely reformed and changed by people on the backbone of permitted development.
Sorry,
Was that a statement, Councillor Alexander, or a question?
No, it wasn't a statement.
No, it's a question.
What is the danger of us causing a president here and allowing a floodgate?
Unfortunately, the perception of the public of what they can and can't do is a continuous challenge for the authority, and expressly telling them what is permitted development and what is not allowed. And of course, in some cases, we've removed the permitted development rights away from some estates. That's a matter of education. That's a matter of getting the message out in an effective way. There is no punishment for retrospective applications. I know there are ideas around increased fees and other matters that are going around again at the moment, but ultimately, you know, they've discovered that this needed planning permission. They've put the application in to rectify that position. I think it actually serves as a good example of realising what they needed to do to correct the situation for us to determine. From the building regulation side of things, I apologise, I don't know the answer, that if there is a building regulations application that has been determined, or whether there's still one to be submitted and be determined, again, possibly retrospectively. And I don't have that answer, but I can come back to you with that separately another day if you wish. But whether it causes a precedent, no, it has to be determined on its own individual merits, and that is what you're here to do.
Councillor Alexander, do you wish to come back on that? Could you put your mic on? Okay. Councillor White.
Thank you, Chairman. As far as I'm concerned, they're my answers. Well, I've received the right answers. So I'm quite willing to approve this application as laid out on page 22, item 1 and 2. So I'd like to so propose.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Placey.
I'm happy to second that.
Are there any further questions for the officer? None. Right. I'm just taking some advice from our solicitor. And so I'll ask her to explain that.
Thank you, Chair. It was just going back to what Mr. Pateman-G said. It's with the recommendation with the removal of condition 1. That's what you'll be voting on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. So we have a proposer, Councillor White, a seconder, and that is with the recommendation with the removal of condition 1. So if we'll go to the vote on this now. Councillor Alexander?
Approve.
Sorry, it's my fault. I should have said for approval. Councillor Everett?
Abstain.
Councillor Placey?
For approval.
Councillor Sudra?
For approval.
Councillor White?
For.
Councillor Wiggins? For. And I will be voting for approval. The application is approved. Item 7 on the agenda, A3 23000697 full, land at 5 Hunters Chase, Ardley, and to present the application to the committee is Naomi Hart. Thank you, Naomi.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I would like to make members aware of the update sheet, which relates to a change in a paragraph number within the recommendation section, referring to the conditions, which should read as 8.2, a change to figures within the comparison table, which I will refer to within my presentation, and the rewording of the recommendation to refer to the completed legal agreement. This application has been referred to members to the planning committee, as it conflicts with the development plan, as it is located outside of the settlement boundary, and it has been recommended for approval. The application seeks planning permission for the replacement of a formal agricultural building with one detached dwelling, which is in place of a dwelling which was granted prior approval in April 2022. The application site is located on the northern side of Hunters Chase, outside of Ardley settlement development boundary. The site is rural in character, with open fields to the north and sporadic residential properties and agricultural buildings in the locality. So this is a view of the application site with the access off of Cobbleshaw Road. This is a site photo standing within the application site looking towards the proposed dwelling. This is a photo of the proposed dwelling. The proposed dwelling will be in front of the existing building here, as you can see, which is slightly overlapped, as I'll show you in a moment. This is looking northwest. looking southwest and a view towards the north and open fields. In April 2022, the agricultural building was granted prior approval to convert it into one dwelling which would serve 3 bedrooms and have an internal floor space of approximately 114 square metres. The access was via 5 Hunters Chase, however the plot in question and number 5 Hunters Chase have both been sold separately. The approved block plan demonstrates the conversion into a dwelling with 2 parking spaces and private amenity space. The slideshow presents the approved elevations of the prior approval application, which is single storey with a dual pitched roof. And this is the floor plan demonstrating it had 3 bedrooms with a bathroom and open plan living space. This is the proposed site layout plan for the current application. In terms of the principle of development, it is acknowledged that the site falls outside of a recognised settlement development boundary and therefore is contrary to policy. However, on this occasion, officers note that the principle of the dwelling on the site was previously established within the prior approval consent, and this application essentially represents a replacement of the dwelling, which forms a significant material consideration. The proposal will result in the introduction of one detached dwelling, which would be sited to the southeastern side of the existing agricultural barn, and it will overlap part of the footprint. In terms of the appearance, the dwelling will be constructed in natural larch wood with marley eternit slate roof, which are materials that are considered sympathetic to the rural character. The layout of the dwelling will be rectangular in shape, consisting of 3 bedrooms, which is the same as the fallback scheme. In terms of the scale, it is noted that the dwelling is 0.9 metres higher than the existing building, well set back in the site and set amongst existing built form. Officers consider that the development would not appear overly incongruous, considered in its context, and equally would not result in an overly harmful impact on the character and appearance of the area. Sufficient private amenity space is provided in line with policy LP4 of the local plan. In terms of impact on the neighbouring amenities, the single-storey scale of the dwelling minimises any impact with its low eaves height and low ridge height. This, together with the size of the plot and separation distance, ensures there's no harm to residential amenities in terms of light, sunlight, outlook, overlooking or privacy. A construction method statement has been provided with the application to help minimise any noise or disturbance to the neighbouring properties during construction. In line with policy SBL3, the block plan provided demonstrates that a concrete pad will be provided to the front of the application site to house bin storage and collection points. The access to the prior approval application was via 5 Hunters Chase. However, as mentioned previously, both plots have been subsequently sold. The access to the current application is via an existing agricultural access along Coggleshall Road. In terms of highway safety, Essex Highways authorities have been consulted on this application and have raised no objections to the access from Coggleshall Road, subject to a condition relating to residential travel pack. The highway officer stated that the use of the building as a dwelling would not give rise to a significant increase in vehicular movement to and from the site or result in a material change in the character of the traffic in the vicinity. The dwelling is served by 2 parking spaces in line with Essex parking standards, and sufficient turning is provided on the site. The original block plan demonstrates that the parking to serve the dwelling will be located in close proximity to Coggleshall Road with a long narrow footpath to the dwelling. Officers did not deem this practical and as a result requested for amended plans of the planning agent. This is the plan that was provided by the planning agent, which creates a curved driveway to the dwelling, which enables the existing trees to remain in situ, apart from one which is to be removed. The amended parking area and driveway into the site is considered to be a visual improvement from Coggleshall Road, with the introduction of landscaping to help soften and enhance the appearance of the development. Essex County Council Place Services Ecology Team have been consulted on the application and initially raised a holding objection due to the lack of ecological information and that the site is within an amber risk zone for great crested newts. The planning agent provided an ecological survey and assessment, and the survey concluded that there were no evidence of bats present on the site. However, it's probable that bats from the nearby roost would forage across the site. This behaviour would be expected to continue after the works are completed, and it's considered that the proposal would not have a detrimental impact upon the local bat population. There were no evidence of a suitable habitat on the site for great crested newts or other species. The survey recommended biodiversity enhancements in the form of existing gaps along the site boundaries, which were retained to allow hedgehogs and common toads to forage. The ecology team were reconsulted and had no objections subject to conditions securing the biodiversity mitigations and enhancement measures. The dwelling will be served by a package treatment plant, which is in accordance with policy PPL 5 of the local plan. Consultation has been undertaken with the council's tree and landscaping officer. The position of the existing access will move slightly to the south of the existing position, and therefore this will necessitate the removal of a short section of boundary treatment. However, a landscaping condition has been imposed to ensure that the replacement planting is provided and to obtain details of the landscaping on the amended site layout plan. The application is provided with a completed unilateral undertaking towards RAMS. No contribution was requested from the open space team, and therefore a unilateral undertaking was not required. The application is accompanied by electric vehicle charging point specification and an energy statement. The statement details the sustainability approach of the development, including the use of a water butt, a compost bin, scheme of water reduction and heating in the form of an air source heat pump. The specification details that the charging point will be provided on an external wall. The applicant has set out measures that will be incorporated into the design, layout and construction aimed at maximising the use of renewable energy. As you can see there's a comparison table between the original prior approval and the new dwelling under this application. It is noted that the update sheet refers to changes to the ridge height and eaves height of the prior approval and changes to the eave height of the current application. As outlined in the table, there is an increase in the ridge height of the new dwelling and slight increase in the footprint. It is noted in the planning statement that the planning agent has stated that the floor space has been reduced by 4 square metres in comparison to the fallback position. However, officers have undertaken their own assessment based on the information and plans provided and believe that the proposed dwelling will increase the floor space by approximately 6 square metres. Due to the dwelling being set back within the site, the increased height, which is not considered to appear significantly out of keeping, it is considered that the increase will appear acceptable in this location. Ardleigh Parish Council object to the application and no letters of objection have been received. In conclusion, the proposed demolition of the existing agricultural building and its replacement with a 3-bed dwelling is acceptable in principle following the previous prior approval granted on the site. Although the position of the dwelling is not the same, the proposed dwelling overlaps the footprint of the agricultural building. The dwelling will result in an increase in height and footprint in comparison to the existing building. However, officers do not consider this to be significantly harmful to the character and appearance of the area. There are no significant issues in respect to neighbouring amenities or harm to trees. Essex Highways have raised no objections and there is sufficient space for parking. Accordingly, the application is to be policy compliant and officers recommend for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Naomi. Speakers. I have one speaker on the list for this application. On behalf of the applicant, Miss Molly Foley. Molly, if you'd like to come forward, I'm sure you know exactly where to go. And when you're ready, you push the button, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. The proposal before members tonight is for a self-built dwelling for a family based in Tendring whose children attend the local school. This application seeks to provide a bespoke design to meet the needs of their growing family. I'm sure you are familiar with the significant weight of the fallback position afforded by the council when granting planning permission to convert the existing agricultural building into a dwelling in April last year. The design shows simple elevations to reflect that of the fallback position in materials sensitive to that of the rural area with natural larchwood. The proposed new build dwelling overlaps with the extant permission, so there can be no doubt that the agricultural building will be demolished if this scheme is supported. The existing hedgerow is to be reinforced with a native species, and the layout has been designed to retain the existing trees almost entirely. Turning to highway matters in the hopes to provide some clarity, the dwelling will be served by the existing access. Less than a metre of hedgerow would need to be removed to facilitate the hard standing. Prior to the planning applications at the site, this field entrance was used by agricultural vehicles entering and egressing the site 7 days a week, collecting farm machinery stored in the barn. Given this, the Highways Authority at Essex County Council deemed that the dwelling would not give rise to a significant increase in vehicle movements to or from the site, nor result in a material change of character of the traffic in the vicinity. During the consideration of the scheme, crash maps were consulted. This is a government dataset dating back to the year 2000 for reported vehicle accidents. No reports have been logged at this access, nor along this section of Coggeshall Road. It can only be considered that the parking and use of 2 cars would be a reduction in vehicle movements, thereby improving highway safety, as confirmed by the Highways Authority. There have been no objections from any statutory consultees, and the Council's planning team are recommending approval. This is on the basis that the scheme before the committee tonight is not materially different to the fallback position, as confirmed by your officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. And I'll just ask the officer, Naomi, if there's anything you'd like to come back on there.
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Naomi. Over to you, members, for questions for the officer. Councillor Everett and then Councillor Wiggins.
Thank you. Presumably, when this application was put in, a foul drainage assessment form was filled in. Where is the nearest mains drainage to this property, please?
Bear with us, we'll see if we can find it. Do you want to give me the second question while we're waiting?
And second question, electric vehicle charging points. I assume that electric vehicle charging point is on the building. How close are the parking spaces to that charging point?
Right, so 2 tasks. We'll come back to you in a moment.
Do you want the bats one as well?
In response to your first question, we don't exactly know where the nearest main sewer is because it is located in such a rural location, but then the next best option on the list is the package treatment plant, which the applicant has gone for. And under in their question 11 of the application form, it says that it's not intended to connect to a main sewer. Instead, the foul sewage will be disposed of away with a package treatment plant, as the mains connection is not possible. And we've considered the acceptability of this, and the site is not in close proximity to a watercourse either, and therefore it's acceptable in this location.
Thanks. The reason why I asked that question is if number 5 has mains drainage, then that would be the top of the hierarchy, and it would be preferable to link to mains, because that's top of the hierarchy, rather than to do a treatment plant. So that's quite an important question in respect to that.
All I can say, Chairman, is we don't actually know what the sewer related infrastructure is for the existing houses either. We don't have that information to hand. So I don't know what their current positions is, but unfortunately they're not part of this application, so I can only deal with this application.
The reason why I asked whether foul drainage assessment had been done is because that's almost the first question on foul drainage assessment is what facilities are locally available in terms of foul drainage. So had that been filled in, that information should be there. I mean, maybe the agent can help us. Is number 5 on foul drainage, and if so, why are we not connecting to it?
Yeah, if I can just jump in at this point, yeah, you're absolutely right. The priority with PPL 5 is to connect to a mains drainage wherever possible. I think in locations such as this, so on this occasion, as far as I'm aware, the agent for the application has not provided the FDA form that you refer to. So therefore, we just have to assess the application, the submission based on what information we have before us. Typically speaking, in locations such as this, it's unlikely there's going to be a mains drainage. I can't guarantee that on the basis we don't have the FDA assessment. If you look at paragraph 6.56 within the officer's report, it kind of outlines why that we consider that the package treatment plant as the sort of second best option after a mains drainage. Why we, for the reasons listed within that, that's why we've come to the conclusion that it is acceptable. But yes, take your point that mains drainage is the preferable option yeah, for every application if possible.
Is there a way we can condition that if it is in the vicinity, then it should be connected to?
Sorry, I'm having a hunt round on the Anglia Water mapping system that I've got access to. It shows me various sewers and other things. Certainly nothing around here. That's immediately coming up. I missed the question, I do apologise. What was the question again, please?
Sorry, could you just repeat that last question again, please?
About the electric vehicle charging line. The electric vehicle charging point would normally be on the property. The parking spaces are identified quite a long way away from the property. So how do they charge those vehicles if they're not able to get the vehicles close to the property?
Well, there's the two choices. Obviously, you'd be surprised how long a cable my father has got for his to get to the other side of the garden. So I would say that distance is probably the equivalent of what my dad does, but I appreciate that's not a professional answer. But the other answer is that you can put an underground cable in that then comes up and is as a proper installation adjacent to the parking space itself. I think for clarity, we've got a condition on broadband, have we here? So we do have a condition on broadband as part of your recommendation. I've got no problem with just clarifying that point as part of that condition, if you would allow me to adjust the wording accordingly.
And my final question related to bats. The preliminary ecological, if I can say it, looked at the position of bats within the existing building and found none, but did say that that bats were using the area as a foraging and commuting route. If that is the case, I notice we have a condition about lighting, sensitive lighting. If that is the case, from my perspective, I would rather say that there should be no external lighting rather than messing about with reports and things to establish whether the bats are going near to the house and whatever. I think it would be clearer if it were no lighting externally. Is that something that we can do as part of a change to that condition?
I think that would be a matter of debate, that it's necessary to require that. Ultimately, the existing building, the existing agricultural building, could have external lighting on it now. We would have no control over that. But on the other hand, this is a residential use that may have nighttime activity, and therefore control of lighting might be necessary. They might put more domestic lighting within the garden to line up the driveway so you can see where you're going. You could do it either way, and I would happily take members' opinion in the debate if they wish to impose a more restrictive condition to start with, which says no external lighting unless agreed, and then any scheme that comes forward would be something for us to consider as and when.
Councillor Wiggins.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to know whether there were going to be solar panels put on the roof. I didn't. There were lots of other things, but solar panels didn't come up.
No, they're not.
Should there not be solar panels on the roof?
We've got air source heat pumps that are part of this proposal. I'm just double checking, but we don't have solar panels that's in the arrangements. We have some, but not that particular point. So no, I think the answer at the moment is no, there is not solar panels. I'll come back to you if we find anything else that suggests otherwise, but from what we can see on the plans especially, and obviously in the statement we've got, it doesn't confirm that solar panels would be on this provision, on this development.
Should they not go on all new properties?
No, there is no requirement for solar panels on new properties.
Okay.
Councillor White.
Thank you, Chairman. I think most of the points that I wanted to raise have been covered. Again, I'll say that I do support this application. What did worry me about it, though, was the access onto Coggeshall Road, I think it's called. There's a nice established hedge along there, and I know the application says somewhere in it that part of it's got to be cut back, which I found rather interesting as part of the thing. Said it was a regular access way for tractors, but nevertheless, part of it then says we've got to cut the hedge back. I know Councillor Alexander and I nearly missed the bus because we were standing back with a car that was rather charging round that road. It's not far down there, but could I ask what are the proposals for that? I think it's a blackthorn hedge. It's a well-established hedge anyhow, and if they're cutting part of it back, I don't know how the tractors got through the last time, but nevertheless, I'm not pushing that. But I'd like to know how much of that hedge has got to be cut back so that you can get a sight line through there. That's my question.
So yes, there will be some loss of the hedgerow, but there is a condition on the permission to allow for replacement hedging for the element that is going to be lost. So that will come as a discharge of condition application. I will come back to you with the size of the access is now going to be 6 metres, roughly. Thank you.
Thank you, Naomi. If there are no more questions for the officer, we'll go into debate. And I will just thank Councillor White for mentioning on the site visit this morning, which he, if he hadn't have done, I would have done, with the car that came round the corner this morning. And the funny thing was that I don't think any of us actually heard that car come round, did we? And what in my opinion, I'm only going by what happens where I live, with a very similar corner, is that the vegetation soaks up the sound and you don't hear the car coming around the corner. But that's not a question, that was just an observation from the site visit this morning. But we're all in one piece. Nobody got run over. Oh, sorry, was there another question? Sorry, Councillor Wiggins, I do apologise. Go ahead if you have another question.
Sorry. And the other question I was going to ask was what was this driveway going to be made of, please?
There is a condition for it to be permeable.
Councillor Alexander.
Are we in debate yet, Chair?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I was most pleased when we were out really on site to hear the words of the agent to say that with the exception of one, the trees will be retained. They are fine specimens, they're healthy and they're young. However, the one that's destined to be removed doesn't look the same quality and it doesn't have that same vigor. I share Councillor White's liking of this idea. I have no problem with this application whatsoever, which is very rare. I normally ask questions, as you know, but I think that when you have time, if Councillor White would like to lead it, I'd be quite happy to chip in at that point.
Members, are there any further questions for the officer? Any further comments on the application? Councillor White has indicated that he is supporting the application. Are you proposing, Councillor White?
I will, but Councillor Everett is also.
Councillor Everett?
Thank you. There's clearly some concern about the safety of the access and egress from the site. Now, I'm very aware that highways are the statutory undertaker of all of that sort of stuff. However, we have a planning requirement that we have to make sure that we are satisfied that it is safe. With that in mind, is there any way that we can condition something about the access without necessarily having to go through highways?
So this might sound a bit harsh, but I'm going to sort of just start from the beginning and work my way through this because it might be the easiest thing to do. What we've got here at the moment is an existing access. This existing access, whether it's being used right now or it can be used tomorrow immediately without any control from us, is there for agricultural purposes, and it is unlimited in respect of traffic that can be 24 hours, 20 days, 7 days a week. And unfortunately for us, that is our starting baseline position that we have to then look at materially in respect of, so if we switch this to a residential use, is there an improvement to that situation or not? On top of that, not only are they going to use this existing access, which is already there, and therefore the residential use could be less than what the agricultural use in its worst state could be, we then have to move on to, well, actually, they're looking to improve this access. So they're widening this access, which means we've got an existing situation that might be better through use, but it might also be better through improvement that is being shown on the plan that we have before us. So my position of saying further conditions to monopolise that further could be argued to be unreasonable, because we're already gaining a position that is better than what we are or what we have at this moment in time. My other problem is that what conditions could we apply that would improve the situation without consequences? And the other consequences of improvement, e.g. making the access wider or the visibilities wider, would be that you'd actually chop away an awful lot more of the hedgerow. So there's a bit of a balance there in your debate that you may wish to consider further if you were to go down that road, sorry, forgive the pun, but were to travel down that road to improve the access further. That may have repercussions on the other tree that I think is near the front there as well. I can't think of any other specific access improvements you would want to or could make beyond taking out more hedgerow, and I will leave you to consider that further. If you were to consider going down the road of approval as we have recommended as officers, can I just ask that members do consider the broadband condition to be agreed and clarified, and you need to debate whether you wish to change the condition number 6 on the lighting, whether that is to be changed to no external lighting unless otherwise agreed in writing. Thank you.
Are there any further questions for the officer? Councillor White has indicated that he will propose the application, and I will just ask Councillor White if he's okay to confirm with the conditions as were just confirmed by Mr. Pateman-G. The amendment to the conditions?
Yes. The officer just confirmed that clause 4, that's on broadband, and also clause 6 you were suggesting an amendment to. Right. And earlier in the debate, Councillor Everett actually suggested, but it got glossed over, that we ought to put a condition that ideally we'd like to see this connected to a main sewer. If that is not possible, then we're quite happy to accept the proposal. But ideally we'd like to see the main sewer. Could that be worded as a condition?
So the recommendation, let me put it as a recommendation to yourself. In terms of condition 4, we are asking that we adjust the broadband condition to clarify the points of connection and where they will be on the site. So that covers that. And we are also clarifying, I think let's just take it as read, that we will change that condition, number 6, so that it is no external lighting unless agreed in writing, as opposed to the current wording, which is the other way round. So we'll just put a blanket, no external lighting unless otherwise agreed in writing. That deals with those two. In respect of the sewer, I can't word a condition that says if it's a possible, because it's not precise or in any way accurate that would pass the tests of conditions. And who's to judge what is the art of the possible? And the art of the possible may be very expensive and therefore unreasonable. And on that basis, I would not recommend a condition to try to find a way to redesign a scheme to connect up to a sewer when that is not before us.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, then with those two conditions, a little bit of knowledge about that site, I think it's hardly unlikely that there is a main sewer down that particular lane, which I know reasonably well. So I'm happy to accept what John says on that. So with the conditions as modified,
If I may interrupt, my apologies. I said condition 4, it's condition 10, which is broadband. My mistake. I've just been corrected by my officers.
Yep. Then I would accept that, certainly.
Councillor Everett.
If it hasn't already been seconded, I'd like to second it.
Councillor Alexander beat you to it.
Oh, he hasn't. Right, okay. In which case, I would like to make a comment on what the Vice Chairman just said, which is that the foul drainage assessment and the binding rules quite clearly state exactly how many metres away, if the mains drainage is within a certain number of metres, then it has to be connected to. So perhaps we could put on an informative saying something along those lines, that if the drainage is so many metres, and I don't know what the meterage is, it might be 50 metres per property, so it's per number of properties, and that needs to be complied with.
I think ultimately the councillor is correct in respect of the policy. Whether we should have made more endeavours to have pursued that point, I offer my apology. We have assessed that the package sewage treatment is acceptable, and ultimately, when it comes down to it, planning harm is the key point. But you have my apologies that where we got to get here, perhaps a bit more choppy than it should have been, and I will genuinely apologise for that, and we'll come back on that another point. I think what we need is more accessibility to understand where the Anglia Waters infrastructure is in future, and I will take that away with me to take up with my officers separately, because ultimately if the applicant hasn't provided that information, that does put us into a position of having to self-assess this, which in this case has become a bit of a debate, which we probably should have sought to avoid. So on that basis, you have my apologies. You could put an informative to say, applicant is recommended to put best endeavours to do so, but unfortunately with any informative, they're not required to do anything at all about that. But I can only ask maybe to accept that as the only point I can. Obviously members may decide to go another way if they wish to, that's still part of the debate, but that's all I can offer at this time, and my apologies.
So to recap, we have a proposal from Councillor White as per the conditions stated by Mr. Pateman G, with the amendment to the conditions, and seconded by Councillor Alexander. So we'll now go to the vote on this one. Councillor Alexander voting for approval.
For.
Councillor Everett.
For.
Councillor Placey.
For.
Councillor Sudra.
For.
Councillor White.
For.
Councillor Wiggins?
For.
And I am voting for approval. Thank you, members. We'll now have a quick 5-minute break. If you'd like to freeze the live stream, please, Emma. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody, to part 2, and I'll just ask Hattie if everything's going well on the live streaming. Yeah, good. Okay. So now we are on to item 8, which is A4 2100386 stroke 4, which is 121 123 High Street, Harwich. And this application will be presented by Michael Pingram. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. So yeah, this application seeks planning permission for the construction of a 3-storey building to form 7 apartments, all served by 1 bedroom and 1 additional studio flat. The ground floor commercial unit is to be retained, with a first floor commercial unit also proposed. So the application site is located on the southeastern side of High Street at the junction with Bay Road, and comprises a commercial unit with the shop front facing High Street, offices behind, and a beauty salon in a wooden structure to the rear, with 2 parking spaces in between the 2 buildings. As you can see on this shot here, the surrounding area is made up, is quite heavily urbanised, made up of 2 and 3-storey buildings with commercial premises at ground floor and flats above, fronting on High Street. To the east and rear of the site is an area of council-owned land that is now a little bit more advanced than the image you can see in front, because it's now actually operational as a public car park. So just run through some photos for you. So this is facing southeast towards the front of the site. Again, from the sort of south, again looking at the front of the site. This is looking at the opposite side of the road along the High Street. And this is the junction with Bay Road, with the application site sort of to the left of the screen there. And this is looking from the other side, facing north from Bay Road. And this is facing west, so this would look at where the rear is, and this is from the new public car park. Okay, and here's the elevation, so you can see it's the 3-storey property. You can see that the topography of the site slopes upwards there. I'll just go through the floor plans. This is the ground floor plan. You can see here that it's got 1 residential unit. It's got 1 residential unit and a Class E use, and also cycle and waste provision. The first floor also includes a Class E unit, as well as 3 residential units, and to the second floor there is 4 residential units. So just to run through the background, I'm sure many members here tonight are probably familiar with the site. So back in April 2022, the exact same application was determined by the Planning Committee with a recommendation for approval. The key point to this, though, is that this was subject to the completion of a legal agreement to secure financial contributions towards RAMs, open space, and also a highways contribution towards residents parking. This needed to be completed within 6 months of the determination of that committee, and we are approximately sort of 18 months ahead, so essentially we just need to bring it back to you because it didn't meet that recommendation. In addition, it's worth pointing out that while the original recommendation included a contribution towards open space, officers have since noted that the council's open space team do not actually require any contribution given the need and available facilities. So the recommendation has been slightly revised to remove the request for open space and just focus on the RAMs and the resident parking contributions. All other elements of the development remain exactly the same as before. However, I will just run through the key considerations regardless. So in terms of the principle of development, the application site falls within the settlement boundary for Dovercourt, and would also support the council's regeneration objective for the Dovercourt town centre, and therefore the principle is considered acceptable. The building is of a similar 3-storey nature and traditional design to the surrounding area, and is considered to make significant improvements to the character of the conservation area and overall regeneration of the wider area. Therefore, it's not considered that the proposed building would lead to substantial harm to the setting of the nearby listed buildings, and would positively contribute to the renewed vitality of this area of the High Street. That said, due to the prominence of the building within the conservation area, our colleagues at Essex County Council Place Services Heritage have said that the overall success of the scheme will be realised through the use of high quality materials and fixtures, and therefore conditions to secure these details are recommended. There is no provision for any off-street parking for the units, which technically is in conflict with the parking standards. However, in sort of weighing up the harm of this, the site is considered to be within a sustainable location with extremely good transport links by bus and train, along with a wide range of amenities within walking and or cycling distance of the site. A reduction in car parking provision in a location such as this is not considered to be of a significant concern, particularly given that the units are all one bedroom and would typically not attract families necessarily. In addition, Essex County Highways have raised no objections subject to conditions, as well as the financial contribution that I've mentioned before, and it's worth pointing out that this has all been secured now via a legal agreement. There are neighbouring residential properties located to the north, south and west. However, windows to the rear elevation have been kept to a minimum and would serve the main living area of just 2 of the proposed units. Furthermore, the proposed balconies to the Bay Road elevation have been removed and replaced with sash windows, thereby reducing any perceived or actual overlooking concerns to residents opposite. Therefore, the proposal is not considered to result in a harmful impact to the amenities of neighbouring properties. There is no communal amenity space provided within the site. However, given the central location of the building and the close proximity to the coast and open green space, the lack of amenity space is not considered to be harmful enough on balance to recommend a reason for refusal. As outlined earlier, since the determination of the application back in April 2022, a legal agreement has been finalised to secure the financial contributions towards RAMS and residential parking. So in conclusion, the site falls within the settlement boundary for Dovercourt and will aid in the regeneration of the area, so is supported in principle. The design, scale and layout of the proposal is supported by officers and would not be harmful to the setting of the Dovercourt Conservation Area or nearby listed buildings, and will also not significantly harm the amenities of any neighbouring properties. Whilst there is no parking provided, given the site's highly sustainable location, with sustainable transport options available within the immediate vicinity, officers do not consider that this is so harmful that it justifies a reason for refusal, and also in assessing that, do note that Essex Highways don't object. As I've mentioned before, since the initial determination, a legal agreement has now been secured for the financial contributions towards RAMS and resident parking, and taking all of the above into consideration, the proposal is considered to be policy compliant and recommended for approval. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Michael. Speakers, there are none on this application, so we'll go over to members for questions for the officer. Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, Chair. Right, it's another one of these applications. I'm quite in favour of it. It's a nice, I think will blend in nicely. But just if you could help me out here, please. The self-contained flats, are they self-contained with their own ensuite bathroom and toilet, washroom, etc., kitchen? Is that what we're looking at? We're not looking at anything remotely like an HMO setup.
Yeah, I can confirm 100% it's not a HMO application. It's very clearly outlined within the description. These are just 1-bedroom flats. I don't know how clear it is on the image I'm sharing at the moment, but it just gives you a rough indication of what the layout of each of the properties are. But they are just 1-bedroom flats. There's one studio, but the other are just 7 1-bedroom flats, not a HMO.
No more questions. Thank you, Chair.
Any further questions for the officer, Councillor Placey?
Sorry, yeah, I think this is a good application. I do worry about the parking because that is going to impact on the residents nearby. Suddenly there's going to be a lot of problems there. But just in condition number 3, a water bath per dwelling. They haven't got any outside amenities, so I should have maybe picked that up before, sorry. Well, the compost bin's the little food bin, isn't it?
Yeah, we're happy to amend that condition to reflect that. Thank you.
If there are no further questions for the officers, then we're now in debate. Does anybody have a proposal? Councillor White?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. On the point that's just been raised about car parking, presumably the car park, well, I know it is, the parking space is controlled by tendering. And I must say I was very impressed to see what they'd done today on the site. But do we have, if we had somebody in this block of flats who had a car, I take the point that you've got the railway, you've got the buses and everything else, but you may have one person with a car. Could they park that car on the TDC car park at the back? Or are we going to bring out regulations which say no car shall be left on there overnight or something like that? Otherwise, I think it's a splendid application, but it does just worry me that you might want somebody, given that the car parking space over the back is, something's going to happen to that. It's no longer a car parking space. So if somebody had a car out of all these properties, where would he park it overnight?
Yeah, I totally take your point. So we have assessed the lack of parking provision. We've freely admitted within our report that it doesn't meet with the car parking standards, so we've had to weigh up whether that is acceptable. And for numerous reasons sort of outlined in the report, that is acceptable in our opinion, in terms of the fact that they're one-bedroom properties. It's a very highly sustainable location that generally just wouldn't encourage too much need for car parking. But I totally understand your point. If they did have a car, then there's no provision on site for it. That's the only real answer I can give you. In terms of the car park next door, I don't know the full details of the council scheme, but I understand there's resident parking for like a permit for all users across the district. I don't know the exact details. That would fall more within our parking colleagues' remit than mine, but there might be some scope there that they could use that car park for some level, but exactly what they could do with that, I couldn't answer that, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, just bear with me. Open spaces, a little bit worried about that. They're not going to pay any contribution towards this. I thought it's a classic example where the property hasn't got any open spaces of its own, and therefore we should be asking for some open space contribution.
Yeah, so the background to this. So originally on the first time this application was dealt with, back in April 22, it was part of the recommendation. Genuinely, the reason, I think it was just an error on the officer's part at that time. It was just an accident. I think open space never required a contribution. I've since picked up the case and I've spoken with our open space colleagues, and they've reaffirmed that they don't require a contribution. So there's no, it's not reasonable for us to request it, rightly or wrongly. That's the position. So that's why I've been working with the applicant to secure a UU for the other measures, but not for the open space element.
Thank you very much. If there are no further comments, Chairman, I'm willing to propose this application.
Thank you, Councillor White. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Alexander? Are there any further comments or questions for the officer? If not, I'm happy to go to the vote on this one. No? Okay, voting for approval as per the recommendation. Councillor Alexander.
For.
Councillor Everett.
For.
Councillor Placey.
For.
Councillor Sudra.
For.
Councillor Wiggins.
For.
Councillor White.
For.
And I am voting 4. And that application is approved. And that just leaves me to tell you the date of the next scheduled meeting of the Planning Committee, which will be on Monday the 27th of November at 5 p.m. here in the committee room. So thank you all for tuning in to our live stream, and hope those of you here have a safe journey home. Good night, everybody.